Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. DJ here, hands-on dev with SAP Dev with QMacro, that's me. And welcome to this live stream. This is one of the occasional midweek live streams. We're still live streaming regularly every week on Friday morning my time. That's the usual schedule. But this is one of the sort of the odd occasional live streams we'll do sort of midweek. Had a few requests to do one today, so we're doing one today. Normally I would do this occasional midweek live stream slot at 3 p.m. my time, which is an hour from now, but I can't do that today, so that's why it's an hour earlier. So if we have a look on the schedule shortly, you'll see what I mean. So I'm really glad that you can make it. That's really good. I'm just going to move this screen here a little bit so I can see the chat. It's all good. Let me know if there's anything amiss. Today we're going to cover just a little bit of Node.js JavaScript to extend the CSV filter script. I don't want to do too much to it because I think it's fairly useful as it is. Plus the fact that this is an afternoon for me and I'm useless, even more useless, let me put it that way, in the afternoons. I'm definitely a morning person. So I've just made a coffee, but I've drunk it already in my non-Coffee Corner podcast cup. I don't know why. But I got some water. There's lovely sunshine outside. It's the spring equinox today. So I guess all the clocks will be going forward probably towards the end of this month. I think the clocks are already forwards in some parts of the US. So that's why, for example, if you're joining from the US, welcome and yeah, good morning. So let me just switch to the main scene. I just wanted to remind ourselves of where we are. This is episode 13. If we go down to the upcoming episode list. Hey, howdy, Robertino. How are you doing this afternoon? I'm guessing you're in Europe. Yes, how are you doing this afternoon? Great to see you. We've just started. So yeah, this is episode 13. Stdio-ifying the CSV filter mechanism. We'll look at what that is in a second. I've been busy in the past few days or over the weekend as well, so doing more annotations. So now we've got for episode 7 and some annotations in the form of a blog post. You may have seen those already. Plus, in the queue, I've already uploaded the videos to YouTube, ready to be published on YouTube. It's not me that actually presses the button. In the SAP Developers channel, I'm waiting for 2 more recordings to be published on YouTube. That's the recording of episode 8 and the recording of episode 9. And I also have, where are we? Let's go here, for example. I also have waiting in the wings. Oh, I don't want to write a blog post. I want to manage my blog post. Waiting in the wings, annotations for episode 8 and episode 9. So they're all ready to go. All I need, just to show you a little bit behind the scenes, all I need is the YouTube video ID once it's published on YouTube, and then I can actually modify the links here, all these video ID links. Oops, video ID for all the different hours, minutes and seconds links there. I prepare this, by the way, in Markdown because writing HTML is not the best, and writing in Vim and writing in Markdown is my favorite sort of combination. And actually, I use a macro to do this thing. Let me just show you this just while we're here. Here we go. Let's go into. If we look at, for example, in fact. Yeah. So this is where I write the annotations. And in fact, I start out with a episode X where I've got sort of placeholders here, and then I can sort of start with all sorts of stuff, and then I can add, for example, in 12 minutes in, 12 minutes and 21 seconds in, for example, I can say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, and then I can actually use a macro that I've recorded to convert that. Oh, it's not working. What's going on? To convert that, oh, of course, I'm in the wrong file, to a link that looks like this. So if let's have another one here, 001234, for example. Why is that not working? Oh, I know why. No, that's really interesting. The reason that's not working is because I didn't want to put this in my standard Vim. If I go to my vimrc, which you can check out yourself in my .vim repo here, I've got all sorts of configuration for Vim, doing all sorts of different things. What I didn't want to do is pollute that with project or task specific stuff. And I found out the other week, that you can have project specific Vim configuration. So if we look down here, there's a one bit of configuration here. Let me make that a little bit bigger. This line here, set exrc to enable project or folder specific vimrc settings. Okay, so that's really cool. I found that out by looking at this blog post here. Really, really cool. So what that allows me to do is, and I put it into the folder that's sort of above or below this live stream annotations folder. So let me go into here, and I've got a .vimrc in my shared notes project. Okay, so if I look at that there's my macro that I recorded previously. Okay, and what it does is I just hit @t, and then it goes and modifies the 00, whatever, 00 colon whatever colon whatever, and creates a link out of it, taking that and using it twice in that link. So now if I say episode 9, for example, and I do another one, for example, say, well, at 58 minutes and 1 second, something happens, and now I can just go @t, and that will turn that into a markdown link with the hours, minutes, seconds there, and also in the form that YouTube likes or Twitch previously likes, a little bit of a query parameter here, so we can jump straight to the video. Anyway, that was a little bit random. I have no idea why. Well, yeah, it may be useful. Amit, hello there, welcome, and Mahesh, welcome as well. In the Netherlands, it's Q macro o'clock. That's wonderful. I'm going to try and use that phrase. Hey, Srikanth, good evening. Good evening. Q macro o'clock. I like that. Anyway, let's finish this and get out of there. Get out of there. Get out of there as well. So yeah, so watch out in the next day or so. We'll be seeing the annotations for episodes 8 and 9 coming along. Then I'm almost caught up now. It's quite a bit of work doing the annotations, but there we go. It's got to be done because I think it's useful. Video macro. I'm not sure what you mean there, Srikanth. Give me a shout as to what you mean. I'm not sure what you're asking there. Or you're just saying my name is Video Macro, which I can understand that. Okay, so what we said we'd do in this episode is sort of add a little bit of functionality to our CSV filter utility, so that not only can we specify input files to read and output files to write to, but we can have the utility play nicely in the more general sort of Unix context of shell programming with pipelines. One of the beautiful things about Unix, which effectively the generic operating system Unix, by which I mean, for example, in all its different incarnations, sort of proprietary commercial incarnations, but also in the form of Linux and also in the form of Mac OS. Plus, I think now, I'm pretty sure now there's a Linux subsystem on Windows, so you can get a proper shell on Windows as well. Hey, some programming dude, hello. Macro, yes. So macro as in Q macros. Sorry, macro not as in Q macro, but as in macro. Have you created any macros before, Srikanth? It's quite easy. In fact, if we say here, let's go into here, open up a thing. Let's call it 5perry.txt, and we can say, I have no idea. Let's say this is our test. Now let's say we want a macro to go to the fourth word, or the third word, and capitalize that letter. Okay, so what we'll do is we can say capitalize the first letter of the fourth word. So 1, 2, 3. So 3 words across. In fact, I need to open up my what's it called? Keycaster. There we go. There we can see the Keycaster. Let me move it a little bit closer to my face there. There we go. Okay, so as we know, if we want to go word by word, it's W, W, W. And if also we want to capitalize the character underneath the cursor, it's the tilde sign. So there you go. So let's just undo that. So regardless of where we are, we also want to make it work, from wherever we are in the sentence. So why don't we think about saying, well, I want to go to the start of the sentence, start of the line with 0, 3W, and then a tilde. Okay, so that's capitalized the fourth word in a line. So let's just undo that. Now we can record that as a macro, so we can repeat that. Let's just get some text here. Let's just paste that in. That'll do. So we've got some bits and pieces. Oh, in fact, we've already got there. Okay, so that should be some good test data. I'm just making this up. I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's just save that. And now we'll record a macro. And we record a macro with the @ symbol, right? So press @ and then, for example, S. We record a macro with Q, and then S. For the register we want to record the macro in, and we can see at the bottom left, recording S. And now we'll say 0, 3W, tilde. And then we press Q again, and it stops recording. So now we can go anywhere on a new line here, for example, and hit @S. Okay. Wait. This is bad data. There we go. That's a different word. We can go anywhere in the line, hit @S, and it will capitalize there. So we go to the end of the line there, and @S, it will capitalize that fourth word. I hope that was just a little bit of a demonstration as to how you record macros, how you use them. Effectively, those are also saved in registers and so on, so you can copy those out and put them into Vimarsi. So yeah, I'm using a macro to create a YouTube URL link in Markdown for each of the sort of the hours, minutes, and seconds time points in my annotations. Macros are really super features. There's all sorts of documentation and videos on creating macros. Far more interesting than this, ad hoc example here. So let's just go out there. Okay, so we're going to give our CSV filter utility the ability to read from STDIN and also write to STDOUT, which is actually not that difficult because when we do a console.log, we're writing to STDOUT anyway. But actually, as it turns out, we might want to write to standard error as well. If you're not familiar with the standard IO, what I'm calling standard IO, maybe that's not the right phrase, but with the Unix philosophy of pipes and so on, you have the concept of standard input, which is what a program can read input from, and a program writes to standard output, and it can also write errors to a separate stream, which is known as standard error. And with that design, you get a whole lot of power in that you can chain commands together. You can pipe commands together. So the output of one command the standard out of one command becomes the standard in of the next command, and so on. And you can almost see a parallel between that and what we're doing with the dot chains in our promise-based coding in the grab script, for example. The output of one promise becomes the input to the next. The output of one call via then becomes the input to the next call via then, and so on. So the idea of passing something along the line of small things that process that data and modify it is the same whether it's within a promise dot chain in JavaScript or on the Unix command line. So that's really cool. Hey Napit, welcome. Good evening. Some programming dude, Vim is awesome. I just miss a good debugger for Node.js. Yeah. I have in the past, not here, but I've in the past used actually the Chrome developer tools as a sort of a debugging UI for Node.js based applications. Maybe we should have a look at that in another episode if folks are interested. But to be honest, I would like to learn more about the debugger in VS Code, as that is what we'll be using more of, especially now we're moving back from building these utilities like grab and CSVF back to the main subject of this current episode or current series of episodes, which is the application programming model and so on. So we're moving back to VS Code. We want to do some VS Code debugging. Okay, so let me move this out of the way and let's bring up a terminal. Let's bring that across here. So we've got our code in the CSVF folder, and it's all up to date. Let's just remind ourselves, big enough yet? Let's remind ourselves of what we've got in there. It's a node project, so we've got a package.json. In that package.json, you can see that we've installed SAP CDS because we're using the CSV utility stuff that's inside of the SAP CDS package. We're using the command line arguments node module as well. By the way, I discovered that by accident in Ranger, another feature of Ranger really useful, I can sort of zoom in to the file I'm looking at. So rather than look at it, in fact, let's do that. Let's make this a little bit smaller, so you can see the effect better. So I'm looking through here. I want to see that in all its glory, but without going into edit mode. I can just hit I, and it will zoom that whole thing just to show me that. And I can sort of scroll up and down. Hit I again. Oops. Hit I again, and we're back to where we were. So I think that's really nice. Of course, you can go into that by going right with L and go into edit mode. But of course, you've got to do a couple of key presses to get out of there again. So anyway, package.json, and we're using NodeMon as a development dependency, so we can sort of restart and when we're doing our testing and so on. Okay, so that's what we've got in there, and this is our script. In fact, why don't we go and edit that? By the way, some programming dude has said I did quite a lot, part of cap node. DevTools is too much context switching for me. I even tried Spacemacs. Oh. Now, I've got a friend here in Manchester who swears by Spacemacs, but I'm just not convinced. I mean, Vim bindings in VS Code, great. It makes VS Code a lot more palatable for me. Not that it's a bad experience, but typing-wise, Vim, yes, please. But yeah, I've never tried Spacemacs purely because of the Emacs tones. It's a religious thing, after all, right? Anyway, here's our CSV utility, our CSVF utility. What we want to do is have a look how we read from standard in, as well as, or instead of, reading from a file. So why don't we start out space Vim? Is that the opposite? Is that like Vim without any Vim key bindings? Space Vim. I'm not sure what that is. Or is that just like an even more Vimified version of Spacemacs? I don't know. Let me know. Hey, greetings, Vritzau. It doesn't matter if you're late, that's okay. Oh, Folk. Ah, hello there. Yes, welcome. Don't worry, no need to apologise. You can come and go as you please. It's great to have you here. So we're just starting to look at the CSV filter script. I've been rambling about various bits and pieces, and we're going to sort of modify it so we can read from standard in and write to standard out. Now, why don't we set out by expressing our intentions in the form of the options that we want to use. Because at the moment, if we don't specify the input option, it will default to expecting a file even without the actual option name. Plus, if we don't specify the output option, it will default the value to for the output option to _out.csv, and we don't want that. Oh, space, and we don't want that. Space vim is vim with vim key bindings, but vim with vim key bindings, excellent. Oh, but more community-driven extensions. Okay, cool. One of the things that really appeals to me about Vim, and I'm talking specifically about Vim rather than Spacemacs or Space Vim, or even maybe NeoVim, although I'm not sure, is that I can run it in any environment. It's usually everywhere, and I can run it on my dumb terminals as well. So I'm going to stick with Vim for now because it's wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll say here, what we don't want is to have any default values. So we'll change that to have no default values, and also we don't want that to be any sort of defaultable option. So we'll change that as well. Yeah, that looks okay. We still need to specify the fields, of course. Tell you what, before we do this, let's remind ourselves of how it works. So in here, we've got a sample CSV file. And the normally we'd, in fact, why don't we do this? We'll have a tmux session, and yeah, there we go. Over here, we'll have the editor. We'll make that a little bit smaller. Is that okay? I'm guessing it's still okay size-wise. Oh, thanks for posting the link there. Onivim, Oni. Okay, cool. Okay. There's so many options in terms of editors and IDEs and debugging that it's just not even funny, is it? And there we go. In fact, let's do it manually for now. CLI.js normally will have the verbose option, for example, and normally we'll say input temp suppliers.csv, and we won't specify the output, and we'll see what happens. And we'll have fields, supplier ID. That'll do. Actually, supplier ID, and actually just say cat temp suppliers, supplier ID and company name. Okay, there we go. So CLI.js, verbose, input file temp suppliers CSV, fields, supplier ID, and also, I don't know, city, for example. And if we run that, we'll see that we get the verbose output with the little chevrons there written straight to the screen. I'm using screen deliberately generically for a second. And we can see also that most recently written, as in, yeah, this was just created now, _out.csv 1423. God, is it 23 minutes past 2 already? We've got the output, and in the output, we've got what we want, okay? What we want to be able to do is something more like this. Let's say we've got a process. Let's just imagine this process is producing some CSV. So we're just going to say cat for now as a substitute for that process. So we cat that, it'll just output that. Okay, so cat, and we want to be able to pipe it into CLI.js. Okay, then we need to do fields, supplier ID, and city, for example. And then we want to see the output in standard out, okay? Or we want to be able to sort of redirect standard out to a file, okay? For those of you who are not familiar, so that's what we want to be able to do, okay? We want to bring in some data and flow it through the pipe. The pipe symbol is here. And then allow CLI.js to read the data that's coming in through that pipe through STANDARDIN, process it with the field configuration that we've got, and then output it to STDOUT, which will either come straight to the screen, as in straight to the output here, or we can redirect STDOUT to a file, file.csv. So the greater than sign is redirecting STDOUT, and it'll write that to a file, the name that we'll say here. And also this, I mentioned this STANDARDIN, STANDARDOUT, and standard error. And you can also redirect standard error by to greater than sign and then error.log or something. So that will write any errors that are written to standard error to a file called error.log. So there's such a beautiful flexibility and power in the simplicity of this whole idea of pipelines. Okay, so we want to be able to do that. We can't do that right now because we haven't got the facility. So that's our intention. Let's go back here. We still want the verbose. And yeah, we want to get rid of the default option there. That's what we had before. And we want to get rid of the, yeah, there we go. That's fine. Okay, so basically I think if we do specify an input option, then we take the data from the file specified with the input option. And if we do specify an output option, we write to that file. Otherwise, we read from standard input if there's no input option, and we write to standard output if there's no output option. So far so good. We'll also express that in our help documentation. So input, it's not mandatory anymore. So we'll say defaults to standard in. Yep, defaults, that'll do. Defaults to standard in, and then standard out. Or yeah, let's make it more explicit. Reads from standard in if not specified. Defaults. Okay, that'll do. Okay, that'll do. Interestingly, the syntax highlighting here, of course, it doesn't really realize that it's a multi-line string here with the backticks. You can see the backticks here, starting here and ending sort of here. But anyway, who cares? So the output will default to standard out. And so on. So why don't we also have here another example? Examples, CSV F. Now we can either use the cat and the pipe, or we can also say CSV F fields, supplier ID, city, take from standard input. So the greater than sign is write standard output to a file, and the less than sign is read standard input from a file, for example. So file.input.csv and write to output.csv. Also, we can have cat input.csv, just to express again our intentions of what we want to do. CSV F, I'll do supplier ID and city, and yeah, there we go. And then say, for example, pipe it into less, okay, which will sort of page our output. So that's our intention. I did notice the other week, or just did notice before, that actually I should exit with a 0, not a 1, because exiting with a 1 signifies we're sort of exiting in an error state, but we want to do with that when we're just showing some help. So we'll just change that to a 1. Okay, so far so good. Now I did have a quick look just before I started here with this live stream at the node module that I'd found last week that allows us to write to read from standard in. Let's bring up the browser and GetStandardIn. That's what it's called. GetStandardIn as a string or a buffer. Really easy. So we'll use that, and note here that it's really easy to use, and it's sort of promise based as well. So we call GetStandardIn, and it returns a promise with the data, and we just do with it what we want. So why don't we let's install npm install and save it into our package.json, GetStandardIn. Okay, cool. So what we could do is just write a little test script, standardin.js, that sort of does what it's showing us here. So let me just put that across here so I can just have a look at it. Const getStandardIn equals require getStandardIn, and then we can say getStandard just to see how it feels. Then, well, .log, actually what we'll say here is x's console.log got x's. There we go. That should do it. So why don't we say now echo hello, pipe that into the execution of, there we go, got hello. So we've managed to read, or we could even do this, for example, I guess, node standardin.js and read standardin from a file, for example, etc. hosts. There we go, host file. Okay, cool. That's good. So we know how that works. So let's think about using that and being able to read from standardin if we have no option, if we have no file option, and read from the file if we do. So let's have a look. CLI.js. Here we go. So actually, this is something we need to fix, isn't it? Because we want to be able to not specify an input option. So why don't we say here, or we'll give help if we're asked for help. Okay. Let me get rid of that. So in the chat there. JavaScript is also going to get a pipe operator. Oh, is that in the... wow. Okay. A proposal for adding a simple but useful, it is simple and it is useful, pipeline operator. Now, interestingly enough, I was at a really nice talk on Monday in Manchester at the Lambda Lounge meetup, which is a group of folks interested in functional programming and, well, not just functional programming, but sort of esoteric programming in general. And we had a talk on F#. Now, F# reminded me a little bit of Elm. Now, in fact, drive. Oh no, let's not go there now. I'll send the link maybe later on. But there's a really nice sort of pipeline operator that I've seen in Elm, that I've seen in Elixir, and it looks also a little bit like what you can get in other languages as well. So really cool. Thanks for pointing that out. Some programming dude. Elm rocks. Yeah, Elm is very like Haskell. In fact, why don't we will have a look. Drive.google.com. I did a talk and I got some examples of Elm versus Elixir versus Haskell. Not versus, but where was it? Manchester Lambda Lounge. Here we go. Yes, it does. Elm does use Haskell as a compiler. Yes, you're right. So this is a talk I gave a couple of years ago, actually. If we have a look, there's factorial, there's Haskell. Yeah, here we go. So here's a really simple example. We've got pattern matching here. Look how similar Elm is, for example, to... where's the Haskell one? What did I want to show? There we go. There's Haskell. And there's Elm. Exactly the same pattern matching. But I did want to see... Did I have any Elixir in here as well? Elm, Haskell, Elm. Maybe I didn't. Oh, there we go. Maybe is that the only Elixir? Oh, okay. I'm thinking of another talk where I talked a little bit more about Elixir as well. Anyway, if you're interested in this, in fact, I'll post a link. Why don't I post a link to the slides in the channel because it's publicly available. So there we go. If you're interested in looking at that, that's the presentation. Anyway, there's that. Pipeline operator, very interesting. So we want to now be able to say, yeah, okay, it's okay not to specify an input. So let's go down here and have a look what we do. In fact, the best thing to do is to refactor this so that the code that processes the data that's read from the file at the moment here in line 7 is sort of extracted. So why don't we create this thing called process? Yeah. So const process is a function that takes, well, why don't we call it the same thing? Takes some source data and let's just grab this. Let's grab it all first and stick it in there. Okay. So we've got we're parsing that source data. But what we also want to do is we don't want the process function itself to write the output. So we'll just return this thing here. Return the serialized output. There we go. I'm not sure what we want to do with that yet. So let's just get rid of that or just comment it out. So we've now got a function that will take some source, split it into the top column, which are the fields, and the rows, and do all the stuff it used to do, which is to work out what the indices are of the selected columns, blah, blah, blah. Output this sort of verbose thing here to see what we're filtering to, create the CSV header line, and then add to that the mapped rows. Okay, and we serialize that using the serialize function, which is this thing here, that will just write it as a CSV file. So comma separated, or fields separated by commas there, and lines separated by new lines. Okay, so that's fine. We've got something to do here, haven't we? So why don't we say, let's just sort of make this up. Why don't we say if options dot input. So if we've got values specified for the input file, then why don't we say, well, actually, let's have that there already. What we want to do is we want to read from that. Now, I've noticed that the read file takes a callback, but the where is it? What's it called? The thing we played around with just then is promise based. So again, just before this, I had a quick look to see if I could sort of make the read file function into something that returned a promise. Not that it makes that much difference, but it just feels a little bit cleaner to me, and it will hopefully allow us to make this part of the code as similar to each other as possible. So there's a function, there's a module here called promisify, which I've just read this before, and it allows us, and in fact it's doing exactly what we want to do here. It allows us to make something into, or promisify, I suppose that's the best word to use, promisify an existing function that isn't promise-based. And this example here is perfect. We're using promisify from this utils package, which is a built-in package in Node.js. Notice again, is using destructuring here to grab that promisify from the map that comes back from the require, the promisify function, and then we use a promisify function and we call it, giving it the function that we want to promisify, which is in this case read file, and he's calling it read file as read file async. Why not? Let's do the same. And then we can use the read file function, which has been promisified, with a then. So I think we could do that, right? So why don't we do that? Let's just go over here and npm install save Promisify. Oops. Promisify. Okay, so now const Promisify equals require, Promisify equals require util. So we're just grabbing the single function Promisify from that util package. And then we'll say const, I'm not sure I like this, or const, but we'll change that maybe later. Then we can say const, and we'll have the same, we'll call it the same, we'll do exactly the same thing. There we go. Read file async Promisify. It's not called fs.readfile. In our case, it's just called read file because we've already just grabbed it up here. Read file there. Okay, so that's good. We've got that, and now we can use read file async nicely. So are we all still there, by the way? Let's just see what's going on here. Oops, not that one. There we go. Yeah, cool. Okay. Let me know if this is all good. So we're using Promisify, and we can now say, where are we? Yes, here we go. If options.input, can you see that down there? I'll make that a little bit higher up. There we go. Read file. Oops. Come on, DJ, wake up. Read file async options.input. Okay. Now, what's going on here? Let me just. Where has it gone? Where's my? Did I close it? Hold on. There we go. Sorry. Read file async. We still specify the encoding there. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Encoding, and then okay, perfect. Let's keep that open just in case we need it again. Encoding UTF-8. Then, well, why don't we just say console.log for now, just to see what's working. Okay, so that here, we don't want that anymore. Okay, fine. We'll run it to see if we've not broken anything yet. Let's just find out. So let's find a sample of what we've been doing. Oh, all right. CLI input temp suppliers.csv fields supplier ID will do. Yes, okay, that's fine. In fact, let's just go back here and just change this to, just so we can see, got X's. There we go. Yes, that's it. So we've successfully managed to read from STDIN. Well, actually, sorry, we've successfully managed to read from the files. We haven't broken anything yet in the promisification of this read file. So why don't we just expand this to say else, okay, so we haven't got an input value in the options, then we're going to be reading from standard input. So we can say log reading from standard in, just so we can see what we're doing. And then, yeah, okay, get standard, did I oops. No, I didn't, did I? Let's add that there, get standard in, and then let's move that down a bit. Get standard in. Yeah. Then, oh, there we go. Same thing. Okay, so let's do that. Yeah, then, perfect. And that's what we want. So now if that should still, oh, there we go, that's not right. Unexpected token, then, oh, sorry, yes, of course, there. Okay, fine, that's still the same call, but if we now, in fact, let's have the verbose flag, processing temp suppliers, but now if we don't supply, DJ, what are you doing? Fingers, keyboard. It is the afternoon after all. If we don't supply the input and instead sort of, deliberately, simply we'll say cat temp suppliers and pipe it in. Cool, reading from standard input. That's awesome. So we can read from standard input. If we don't supply an input, and we can read from the file if we do. So it only remains now to sort of bundle this whole sort of call to process into what we want to do. So let's just go to the bottom here. I think tell you what I'll do. I'm just conscious that my head in the video is in the way of the bottom of the file. So why don't I instead switch, there we go. Yeah, that's probably better, isn't it? Yeah, how does it look like on the stream? Yeah, much better. ABAP Freak, hello, good afternoon, morning, evening. Lesser known, there is an util callbackify. Oh, brilliant. So you can go from promises back to callbacks with util.callbackify. That's amazing. That's even nicer, in a bad sort of way, even nicer word than promisify, callbackify, anythingify, I suppose. Awesome, thanks for sharing. This is exactly the sort of information that I like to find out from my my live streaming family. Okay, so where are we? Let's go back to here, and then I can get rid of all these lines now. There we go. That's better. Also, something I learned the other day. Again, this is just still learning by doing. If I wanted to scroll up, normally I would sort of do that, and then of course the cursor's in the wrong place and down again, so a lot of moving about. So there's also Control Y and Control E, which will scroll but leave the cursor where it is, which is beautiful. So I can scroll like this to find out, oh yeah, what's up there, what's in that process thing, and still be in that place. Okay, so we'll do that now. So then we want to pass that data to the process and get it back to write it out. Okay, so we'll say here, process, then process, right? And we'll just modify this for the reading a file for now. Then console.log. Notice how all the stuff we've learned from the grab script using Axios and the dot chain approach using then is making this a lot more natural, and it's just so clean and solid state as well. Especially these two lines here. There's nothing moving there. There's no. It's just, I think it's just so nice. Then process, then console log. So let's have that. Let's write that. Let's go over here and let's bring up the input file invoked version of this and see. Yeah, there we go. So we got we're only asking for supplier ID, and that'll do for now. So we get the supplier ID there in the output and 1, 2, 3. That's really cool. Let's do the same thing for the standard input version. That works as well. Notice, however, and this is where we're starting to get a little bit of an issue, if I wanted to then save that standard output into a file, my output file, greater than sign, redirecting standard output, let's just make that a little bit, there we go. Great, I've managed to redirect the standard output into my file.csv, but look what's in file.csv. We've also got the verbose log output. Okay, so this is where the split stream of standard out and standard error comes into play. So what we can do is, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Yeah, I'm so used to editing on the right-hand pane. There we go. What we can do is modify our log function. Instead of saying console log, we'll write to standard error. Okay, we can capture the output of the verbose output to standard error. So let's change this process.standard_error.write, and we'll just change this to, we'll have that. And also I've read that when you write to standard out or standard error, it doesn't add a new line at the end. So we want to add a new line. So we'll have plus x plus a new line. Okay, that looks better. So we'll do that. That looks okay. So let's now go, back and try that again. Process standard error. Wait a minute. What's going on here? What's going on here? Process.standard_error.write is verbose write of undefined. Process.standard error undefined. Do I need to do? Okay, 1 second. Why have I completely messed up here? Is verbose. Let's just make that. In fact, yeah, that's that. There we go. Let's just have a full line there. Process.standard_error.write. 1 second. Can anybody see what I'm missing here? Anybody looking on the chat here? Anybody? Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we bring up a new thing here. vi standard error.js, process.standard_error.write. Hello. Oops. No standard error. Hello. Okay, so process.standard. Have I just mistyped it or something? Process.standard error. Anybody in the what's going on here? Process.standard error.write. Let's just change that back to console.log for a second. We might, with that, we might see that I've done something stupid. Okay. I haven't. Let's change that back again. Oops. Well, let's just try standardout.write first of all. That's very odd. Now, what am I missing here? So let's just, cannot read property right of undefined. So process.standardout is undefined. Now, how am I invoking that? Cannot read property right of undefined. Let's just have a look on the interwebs. Node.js, process.standardout.write cannot read property right of undefined. copy. Process.standardout.write. Okay, it's not really giving us anything there, is it? Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, why am I not wrapped properly? Let's just close that. Let's just have another look. Why don't we let's go up here and just say right at the start, process.standard and then process.exit. Process is not defined. Process is not defined. What I'm doing, it's such a fundamental error. Such a fundamental error. Because we're also using process.exit here. That doesn't error. Oh, now that's not liking it either. Oh, what a fool! I've just realised what it is. You won't. If this is what it is, I'm an idiot. I've defined a function called process. All right, let's call it process. Well, let's call it filter. I don't know. Let's call it filter CSV. Okay. Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, filter CSV. Oops. Right, now, goodness me. Okay, standard out, standard error. Okay. We've only got 3 minutes left as well. We're almost there anyway, right? So let's just try that now. Okay. This is reading from standard in. Okay, cool. Now we'll redirect the standard out to IDs.csv. There we go, that's nice. So with the standard error, or the logs don't go to IDs.csv anymore. We've got the data in there and just the data. So now we could even redirect the standard error. It's not really an error, but standard error to error.log. So cat IDs.csv and cat error.log. That's what we want. We want the split of the real output from the logging output. Oh my goodness, what a fool I was. Well, let's just finish this off now. Whatever you do, don't define a function called process, and then forget you've defined it. Okay, so so far so good. Where were we on that? Oh, that's right. Yes, I'd gone in and just wanted to change the logging output to standard error, which we've done now. So let's go down here, and awesome. That was, well, I suppose it is awesome we fixed it, but what a fool! What a fool I was. But thank you for the awesome. That's really good. So now, what do we want to do? Filter it instead of console. Well, actually, we do want a console log. Oh, actually, no, we don't. We want to have a function that will either write to standard out, or if we have specified an output option, we want to write it to that file. Okay, so And we've got this thing here, haven't we? So let's do that. Let's move that up to there and have a function called const output. Also feels a little bit dangerous calling it output now, but anyway, no. Output, that takes, well, actually, why don't we do it in a way that we can sort of then partially apply it. Yes, because we don't want necessarily to write a function that relies on data outside of it. So we'll pass, when we call the output function, we'll also pass the configuration map. So we'll say it takes some configuration, and we can call it options. And then that should return a function that is expecting some data like that. Okay, so then we say if options.output, which is would be set to a file name if we specified it, then we want the right file. Let's just move that to there. Right file, options.output, UTF-8, okay. Otherwise, now we could do console log, but let's just do it maybe cleaner. Let's say process.output, sorry, God, process output, what's going on with my brain? Process.standardout.write data. Don't need that anymore. Okay, that looks okay, doesn't it? So now, output, there we go. So let's try that. So this, let's run it with STDIN first of all, and let's put the verbose output to a log file, error.log. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you want to append to a file, it's greater than, for example. So let's append to the error log. And in fact, let's go over here and, no, not one of those. We'll have one of those and say tail -f error.log. So we can see if anything else gets written there. Error.log. That is going to standard out at the moment. Is it? What's going on? To error.log. Output, filtering to supplier ID, then output, process.standardout, right data, what's going on here? I'm rushing now because we're 2 minutes over time. Let me know, do we need to finish right now, or have we got another 5 minutes to have a look at this? Let me know in the comments. I think it's only going to take a couple of minutes to solve what's going on here. So let's go back to here and, you know what? Oops. Of course, output, we've defined output. We've defined output as something that effectively takes two parameters through a sort of curried approach. It's looking for options first, so we've got to supply it with the options, and the output of that call with a single parameter options gives us another function that we can then use. Okay, so let's try that, of course. There we go, perfect. So it's gone to standard output, and we can see the I'm pointing by my finger. We can see the log output going to error.log. Cool. Now, if we say, for example, supplier, that'll do for now, verbose output, new data.csv. Ooh. Oh, okay. Unrecognized field supplier. That's a legitimate error message. ID. Cool. So we get the log written to standard error, which is displayed on on the console, on in the shell, because we're not actually redirecting standard error this time. And hopefully, yes, there's new data. Cat new data. Ah, okay. UTF-8. That's not quite right, is it? Options to output. Ah, what a fool. UTF-8 data. There we go. We need to specify that as well, right? So let's try that again. Is it which way around is it? Options to output. UTF-8. Oh, it's the other way around, isn't it? Yes, of course, it must be. So let's go up to here. Save that. Cat new data. There we go. Oh my goodness. Okay, perfect. We've just finished. So 5 minutes over time, but I think that's okay. We're reading from STDIN if we want, or reading from a file if we want, and we're writing to STDOUT if we want, or writing to a file if we want, and we're capturing the log verbose output to standard error. We got there in the end. That was good. Slightly bumpy, but keeps us awake and everything. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much for interacting on the channel and sharing all this stuff with me. Yes, I'm going to look into this pipeline operator proposal in a little bit more detail tonight. Thank you again. Regular live stream on Friday as usual. We'll get back to CAP and the Northbreeze service, and I'm pretty sure Nabheat, yes, Nabheat, it was you that pointed me to the fact that there's a weird issue that we'd forgotten, which was the discontinued value of the products, Northwind products, was always set to true in the output when we made an OData call. So that's probably what we'll try and have a look at first. So thanks awfully for joining. It makes this so much better, and your interaction is great. And I'll see you on Friday. Okay, have a good day.